Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for standing by and welcome to today's webinar entitled Settlement Service Eligibility and Intake. My name is Sarah Shasia. I'm a project coordinator at OCASI, Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, and I'm your facilitator today. So before we begin, I'd just like to review a few technical details with you to ensure that we can make the most out of your participation in this webinar today. You should see something like this. I'm just going to go through the next slide. This is your control panel. It should look something like this. Because everyone is muted at the beginning of this webinar, there are ways to still participate. So everyone's automatically muted to minimize background noise during the presentation. But we do want you to participate with questions or comments. And there are two ways to do that. You can either use the hand icon, which you see here. Once you click on that, it pops up at my end. And that way I know that you have a question. And I can unmute you if you have a mic, and you can pose your questions directly to the presenters. Or you can type your question here. And when you type it here, only the presenters and myself can see it, and we will read it out loud for everyone, and one of the presenters can answer it. So are these two ways to participate, and I'd like to ask you to hold your questions until both presentations are done. We will schedule about 15 to 20 minutes for questions and answers at the end. And at that point, yes, feel free to type your questions or use the hand icon. Also, I would like to ask you to make sure that your questions and comments are on topic and relevant to all listeners if possible. And finally, we are recording this webinar. So if you just be aware, if you don't want to be heard in the recording for whatever reason, you can still type your questions, like I said, and a copy of the slides will be shared with you as well. So both the slides and the recording will be available on welcomeontario.ca. Under updates, you will find past webinars, or you can go to the wiki it's a wiki page of the Settlement.Org website, and follow the Path Refugees and then Refugee Settlement Support Project, and that will also bring you to the list of recorded webinars and their the PowerPoint presentation. So that was for the technical part. This webinar today is part of OCASI's Refugee Settlement Support Project, Sharing Practices to Build Bridges webinar series. This webinar series aims to clarify roles and responsibilities and increase transparency, and really we want to strengthen the collaboration between refugee sponsors and service providers. The idea for it and its topics came from several focus groups actually, and 2 roundtables that we've held so far this year with many of the service providers that are online today from across Ontario. So this webinar is the 3rd actually in the series, and you can watch previous webinars, like I mentioned, on this website here on the Settlement.Org, at work.org, or welcomeontario.ca. So now I would like to introduce you to our 2 guest speakers. We have LIsa Magliocco. She's the private refugee specialist at Wesley Urban Ministries in Hamilton, and also Eligisa Wootten, who is the Settlement Program Manager from the Newcomer Centre of Peel in Mississauga. So thank you for joining us today, and I am going to hand over the mic to LIsa first, and she will begin with her presentation. So there you go. It's just this way. Go ahead.
It's okay if I talk here.
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is LIsa. I'm from Wesley Urban Ministries, which is located in Hamilton, Ontario. My role there is a private sponsorship specialist. What that entails is providing pre- and post-arrival support to private sponsor groups and their privately sponsored refugees. I also assist with various types of private sponsorship applications, so community sponsorship, group of 5, completing those immigration forms. and also doing consultations to private sponsors regarding financial support and their group capacity. I also provide workshops, information sessions, and assist with post-arrival paperwork, and also provide orientations for once the families arrive here in Canada. So it's quite an interesting role I have there. So in regards to today's webinar, so I'll start off by saying that there's hundreds of service providers across Ontario, each offering its own unique service. Eligibility could be based on several factors: the area, the city that you live in, age, immigration status. Some service providers focus heavily on one area, such as employment, and therefore may need to refer you to elsewhere for other services that you may require. And it's important to look into eligibility of these services prior to the arrival of these sponsored families. So I'll just quickly highlight, let me just turn off the page. Go to the next slide. So just quickly, it's the Canada's refugee system. So there's two main parts: the Refugee Humanitarian Resettlement Program for people who need protection outside, and the In-Canada Asylum Program from within Canada. So today we'll be talking about number one, so protection from overseas. So there's two streams of, two pathways to Canada with the refugees. There's the GARS, which entails jazz, and then the privately sponsored refugees and the different type of sponsorship groups that go along with it. So for GARS, that does include jazz, and I'll just quickly highlight that area. So SAWS work with IRCC to provide additional settlement support to GARS with special needs. Jazz refugees receive help under RAP. This entails services at port of entry, and they receive income support from the Government of Canada for up to 24 months. They're matched with a private sponsorship group who will provide help adjusting life in Canada, significant settlement assistance, and emotional support. And then the BVR combines government and private support, IRCC, and private sponsors, each of which is responsible for 6 months of income support. Private sponsors cover the startup costs and also offer settlement support for the families. Okay, so I created this chart just to help visualize and provide an overview of Canada's resettlement programs and the difference between the two. So the IRCC visa officers that are stationed overseas generally determine if an individual is eligible for resettlement and admissible to Canada. Some refugees are referred to IRCC for consideration by the UNHCR, while others are referred by private sponsors. So the Resettlement Assistance Program, this is a mechanism through which the Government of Canada provides support to GARS. RAP, that's the acronym for it, provides immediate and essential services generally within the first 4 to 6 weeks of a newcomer's arrival in Canada. So first, IRCC provides funding to these service provider organizations for direct services. These services include initial reception, providing temporary accommodation, basic orientation to Canada, life skills training, financial orientation, and finding permanent accommodation, as well as referring to other settlement programs. The second component of the government-assisted refugee program is the income support for eligible refugees. So to be entitled to income support through that program, an individual must be selected to come to Canada as a GAR. The federal government plays a significant role as the funder of the RAP program and utilizes service provider organizations to actually deliver programs and these services. So the Canadian government has taken responsibility and has made an obligation to be responsible to offer support for the GARS for 1 year. So you can look at the Canadian government as essentially being their sponsor for that 1 year. On the other side, you have the private sponsor refugees program. So these are specific individuals, so maybe family members here are aware of family members overseas that they would like to sponsor specifically. This entails financial funds, which depend on the family size, and this comes from the sponsorship group here in Canada. So in addition to the funds, there's a settlement support, which is shown through the settlement plan when completing the immigration application package. So this is not to say that private sponsors themselves do the settlement support entirely, but they have an obligation to link their families to these settlement services that are in the community. And the responsibilities of private sponsors include startup costs, ongoing expenditures such as rent, food, transportation, living allowance, resettlement assistance provided by sponsor during sponsorship period, which includes orientation, interpreter services, school registration, and links to federal and provincial programs. Okay. And this basically just recaps everything that I've said about the WRAP program. And in order to be eligible for this, these are for government-assisted refugees. And at Wesley Urban Ministries, so we have a reception center, which was opened in October 2013 at 52 Catherine Street North in Hamilton. So what we do there on our WRAP is we provide temporary accommodation, which it's hard to say the exact time, but that may last several weeks, 10 to 15 days. And while they are there, they also receive orientations about life in the community, introduction to their rights and responsibilities. They also receive assistance finding permanent accommodation, opening bank accounts, linking GARs to federal provincial programs, and conducting needs assessment. And that's done through our client support service, which entails each GAR would have their own intensive case of manager that would be able to assist them with their settlement tier in Canada. And they also do refer them to other settlement supports. In order to access these services, so these WRAP services are delivered to government-assisted refugees within the first 4 to 6 weeks upon arrival. Okay. All right, so the most important part for private sponsored refugees and being able to access those services in the community. So prior to the arrival of the privately sponsored refugees, a settlement plan needs to be created, and there's going to be another webinar that will go over this in great details. But it's at this point, so I left those 2 screenshots of the forms where it kind of touches upon the settlement plan and what settlement activities specifically the group will utilize while their families are here in Canada. So it's at this point where you really want to start researching, investigating the services that are out in your community. So it's recommended that sponsoring groups review the list of IRC-funded services in the link and contacted the nearest service provider organization to become familiar with their services. And I have that information on the next slide, I think. All right, so how to identify and find various services. So settlement services that are funded by IRCC are available to all permanent residents and protected persons, including privately sponsored refugees. So the settlement services IRC funded for privately sponsored refugees, I listed a few. They entail language assessment and language training, needs assessments and referrals, information and orientation sessions, employment-related services, and community connections. And it's also important to highlight that privately sponsored refugees become permanent residents when they arrive in Canada. So they can get the same government-funded settlement services as other PRs and GARs. So I did have a link, or I don't think the link's on the PowerPoint. Okay, so this is a tool that you can use. So these are free newcomer services, and you can actually tailor it to your area by including your postal code, city, and the types of services that you would like to access. Once you click it, click find, and you'll get a whole list of service providers in your community and what they actually have available. It also mentioned that once the family arrives, so the sponsor may go with them to the service provider organization in order for the settlement needs and plan to be reviewed. While sponsors are the primary providers of many supports during the sponsorship period, sponsors should connect the sponsored refugees with these organizations that provide things such as language assessment, employment, and other specialized services. So in more detail, so what settlement services, what they look like. So language assessment, that will help develop official language skills to live and work in Canada. For needs assessment and referrals, this entails community-based supports such as mental health facilities, shelters for abused women, the information and orientation sessions. So that entails settlement topics, individual and family consultations, counseling, community connections. So privately sponsored refugees are able to access this through IRCC-funded services that will connect their clients to the broader community, public institutions, and community organizations. So examples are settlement workers in schools, one-on-one group mentoring, conversation circles. Okay, and all right, so this is another feature that is on the IRCC website. Yeah, we can show. So if you use the legend, if you look at the legend, it's quite interesting. I like seeing things visually, so this kind of helps. But if you look at the legend, so the community is welcoming Syrian refugees. There's also a resettlement assistance program communities, and it'll show you where they are across Canada. I think there's about 36 of them. And then there's also the service provider organization. So say if you just want to see where the RAP locations are, it would highlight them across the map. Yeah, and if you want to see where the service provider organizations are, you can also click that, and you see how there's so many of them across Canada that are available for permanent residents. Okay. Okay. And then I'll also just highlight another funding source. So IRCC is federal, and then we also have the Ministry of Citizenship Immigration, which is provincial. And these services, so the ministry works with many organizations to meet the changing needs of Ontario's newcomers and to maximize the benefits of immigration for newcomer and Ontario. So what does the ministry actually do? They fund programs and services that help immigrants settle, find a job in their field, improve their English. They provide information and resources to help immigrants get their foreign credentials. They fund community services to support the successful resettlement of refugees in Ontario. And they also fund organizations that help Ontarians privately sponsor refugees. Okay. Oh yeah, and then there's this source, this link that you could access. You could click Find a Settlement Agency or Refugee Services, and you will get a list and the different areas that they are offered in. So let me just go back to that slide. So one of the MCI programs is the Newcomer Settlement Program, where the ministry works to help newcomers integrate successfully and become fully engaged in the social, cultural, civic, and economic life of Ontario. And then if you follow that link, you will be able to find the government-funded community services which are available. So the Newcomer Settlement Program, this provides direct funding for the delivery of settlement and integration services. Its program is delivered by a province-wide network of community-based not-for-profit organizations that provide newcomers with information on the services available to their needs during the settlement. And And this program has broad client eligibility criteria and are open to permanent residents, refugee claimants, international students, and temporary foreign workers. So it's important to keep in mind the various levels of government funding, IRCC being federal and the ministry provincial. The federal government is a primary funder of services to help newcomers settle in this province, but the Ontario Ministry of Citizenship Immigration also has a mandate to successfully settle and integrate newcomers in Ontario and fund settlement and integration services. So mind you, these ministry-funded services are available to PRs, which privately sponsored refugees become once they arrive here in Canada. So they are able to access these services. What else do we have? Just some other resources. I don't think we have this link opened. We don't have it opened, but that's fine. If you click this link, it's I use this quite often. So this is tailoring to Hamilton, but it gives you a wide range of organizations that are available in Hamilton, and it actually separates them through different areas. There's employment area, there's a language, recreation, there's a settlement also area. So if you have the time, it'd be a good resource to access. It'd be helpful if you're from Hamilton, but it's also a good idea if some other municipal cities would want to take on that, having that resource available. And then just some other resources to access. So the Settlement.Org/020, I think this is very useful as well. It provides orientation to families, each with different topics such as driving, Ontario Works. So this is something that privately sponsored refugees can access, and it's also available in Arabic, some of the webinars, so that's actually a really good tool to have available. And it's all online, so they don't really need to reach out to a settlement place exactly. This can be done through a computer. Okay, and then just a quickly overview of Wesley Urban Ministries. So we're a multi-service charitable non-for-profit organization. We have various program areas which include children, youth, and family services, housing and homeless services, neighborhood, and newcomer services. And I've also just posted our vision, our mission, and our values that we have at Wesley. And I think that's it. Oh, and then just our contact information if you'd like. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Very informative. And as I had mentioned before, please hold your questions. We have enough time. We will just continue now with Sylvia's presentation, and then we can take some questions. So Sylvia, I believe you have the controls now, so whenever you're ready, you can start.
Perfect. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And actually, just to kind of build off of what you've already been introduced to, I'm actually the settlement manager at the Newcomer Centre of Peel. And so we are actually a multi-service charitable nonprofit organization. So we have multiple funders, but our primary funder is Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And we offer many of the services that actually Lisa was just referencing in terms of settlement and integration services. So we are located in the region of Peel in Mississauga, in the area of Cooksville. However, we don't have a catchment area, and we've been serving immigrants and refugees from many different areas across Ontario. So if you can get to our office or if you'd like to access our services online, we're more than happy to assist in whatever way we can.
Sorry, can I
yes.
just interrupt? Could you also, I don't know if you have already shared your screen because we can't see it yet.
Oh, my apologies. Let me, okay, hold on. Oh, can you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, sorry. Okay, well, I'll just go back. Actually, that was just the first slide, so you guys haven't missed anything. Yes, so my apologies. But so just to continue, our mission is basically to touch the lives of people by providing quality, customized, and innovative settlement services in a safe, confidential, and respectful environment. And so, as I said, we are focused on serving immigrants and refugees that are coming into Canada, especially if they're settling in the region of Peel, which has become a popular spot for many newcomers to settle. And just to give you an idea, last year we did serve about 14,000 clients. So I just wanted to go through the intake process a little bit with you, just so that you have an idea of when you come in to the Newcomer Centre of Peel, what you can expect. And this is actually pretty typical for many organizations that are designed in a hub-like manner so that you can access multiple services under one roof. So generally, when you come into the Newcomer Centre of Peel, you'll first go in on the first floor to what we call the Welcome Center. And we have a couple of administrators there who are actually handling all the registration of our new clients. So all of our services are free of charge to our clients, but because we have multiple funders, primarily Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, then we do need to gather some information from clients as part of our intake process. So some of the things that we're gathering are name, address, date of birth, landing date, country of origin, and you can see that the list goes on with a couple of other things that we try and capture. So most of this information we are capturing for the purposes of our funder, because we do need to enter in information into a database so that our funder knows that we are actually serving real clients, real individuals. And any other information that we sort of collect beyond the typical PR card number, name, and date of birth. So you'll see we're gathering language information, housing information, marital status, age, education, etc. And the reason why we collect that information is so that we can try to inform our programs and try and customize them based on the trends that we're identifying within our clients and who we're seeing come in through the door. So that, again, if we see in the last 2 years with the huge influx of Syrian refugees, obviously a prominent language for many of the immigrants was Arabic. So we were then able to hire Arabic-speaking workers to help address the needs of those clients. If we have a huge influx of youth, then maybe we need to adjust our programming to be a little bit more youth-friendly, etc. So once you've gone into the Welcome Center and you've engaged in the registration process, actually the administrators downstairs have been trained to do an initial needs assessment, as we call it. And at that point, they are really sort of just getting an idea from clients why they've come in to the Newcomer Centre of Peel. And then they are redirected internally to the various programs that we have, that we offer at Newcomer Centre of Peel. Most of the time, our clients are actually referred directly to the Settlement Department. And within the Settlement Department, we are offering information and orientation services to clients. So clients are connected with a settlement counselor where they can meet one-on-one, and they can get clients at that point are engaging in an in-depth needs assessment. So in the Welcome Center, we sort of find out why they've initially come in, but the settlement counselors are trained in many different ways to ask those probing questions and to really get a sense from clients what it is that they might need. Clients don't always know what it is that they might need. A lot of them might want to come in and engage directly in finding employment and whatnot, but essentially a lot of the time they might need English language classes first before they can even go to that next step of finding work. So after the needs assessment is done, we engage in settlement action planning. So LIsa actually already referenced that. And that's where we sort of talk about short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals, and just itemizing all the different tasks that clients might need to do, whether it's registering their children for school, or identifying different government services that they need access to, whether it's some financial planning or employment, labor market research, etc. And within that settlement action plan, it's actually a dynamic document, because as you go through your integration process, you'll discover that your needs change or the client's needs are changing. So then we kind of always go back to that original document, make modifications, figure out next steps and what actions need to be taken. And the counselors are engaging in follow-up and case management with every single family that they meet with. So it is a very wraparound approach that we really try and engage at Newcomer Centre of Peel, and very client-centered. And I know that a lot of the agencies that you might have already been connected with are following the same process. And actually, as LIsa had referenced, actually, within the settlement department, we do have specifically the NSP, which is the Newcomer Settlement Program. And that is funded, as she mentioned, by the provincial government, by the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration. And obviously, they noticed that there was a need specifically for us to have a program dedicated towards serving refugees. And so within this program, actually, we are serving government-assisted refugees, privately sponsored refugees, and any refugees under the Blended Visa Office referred program. So the Blended Visa program, perhaps many of you are already familiar with that. Refugees are actually partially government assisted and partially private sponsored. So it is a sort of blended mix of the two programs. And so the reason why we have this NSP2 program, actually at Newcomer Centre of Peel, we do have two settlement workers who are dedicated to working specifically with just refugees in order to ensure that they know what services they can access. And there's a different set of needs that we found that have emerged within the refugee population. And we're not just talking about Syrian refugees, actually it can be refugees from any part of the world that have been admitted into Canada. And these counselors are well trained to and well versed in the issues, the immediate settlement needs that those clients might have. So just to kind of elaborate, so again, within the NSP2 program, we are engaging in that overall settlement process of doing the needs assessment, meeting one-on-one within a confidential, safe space, and we're trying to identify the services that they may need. So that's the one-on-one portion. Further to that, though, because we really wanted to be as reactive to the needs of refugees as possible, we incorporated a mentorship program aspect where we are connecting some of our newly arrived refugees with existing immigrants in Canada who might have gone through either the refugee process or the immigration process a couple of years ago. And there's a social component associated with this mentorship program where we're connecting different individuals with one another so that our newly arrived refugees can feel a little bit more comfortable. They can speak to someone in their own language and maybe address some of the less formal settlement needs that they might have, because the settlement counselors really are engaging in a formalized settlement process, whereas the mentorship program has a social aspect associated with it. And of course, we're offering group workshops and group sessions. Some of the workshops that we've offered are related to financial literacy, landlord and tenant laws, banking. We have conversation circles for women, parenting programs, etc. And what else is unique about the NSP2 program is we really wanted to engage specifically the sponsorship agreement holders, because As we know, there were many government-assisted refugees, but this program really is specialized towards helping privately sponsored refugees as well. And we understand that there's an undertaking process that the SAWs have signed, but we want to collaborate with the sponsorship agreement holders to help refugees meet their settlement needs. And there's a lot that settlement agencies can do in the various areas across Ontario to help sponsorship agreement holders, so it isn't just like a one-man show. And of course, we're referring clients to different education and training programs, etc. I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the other services that are offered at the Newcomer Centre of Peel, and I know within some other settlement agencies as well. And LIsa actually gave you some great resources on how to identify service providers and agencies that are close to your area. But all of these programs that I've got listed here are actually open to our privately sponsored refugees. Because they do have PR status, etc. So basically, eligibility for most of our programming includes permanent residents, convention refugees, as well as live-in caregivers. And we do have additional programming that is available specifically for citizens, refugee claimants, international students, and temporary foreign workers. So if you're interested in those programs, I can talk about that perhaps another time. But we've got language instruction for newcomers to Canada, so that's the English language program. The crisis counseling service, we do have someone who specializes in mental health, and we found that that is very helpful for many of our refugee clients who are experiencing PTSD, anxiety disorders, depression, culture shock, and so we've been able to incorporate that into our suite of services. Labor market access for newcomers, so that does include an enhanced language training program for immigrants and refugees that have a higher level of English and are ready to enter into the labor market. Our Global Business Center focuses on allowing our immigrants to, if they wanted to open a business, how they might do that and connecting them with the proper resources and business advisors. The Community Connections program really focuses on youth, adults, as well as our seniors in engaging in social programming and developing those social networks. The Bridging Generations program, we offer parenting workshops and events for our clients. The Care for Newcomer Children program, CNC, that is offered to any of our clients who are in the LINK program or in the Labor Market Access program. While they're in class, their children are cared for within the Child Care Center free of charge. We've got the Settlement Workers in Schools program to help newcomers and youth to sort of adjust to the education system here in Canada, and just ensuring that they are integrating well into that. And we have a co-op and volunteer program to allow people to come in, get some work experience, volunteer at NCP, see if if they're interested in social work and whatnot. And we have a lot of placement students that come in and assist us with all of our programming, including the NSP2 program. So just to give you an idea, based on our last year's statistics, we really did have a majority of government-assisted refugees. But we know now that the government is taking a new approach, and they are going to be admitting a lot more privately sponsored refugees. And so, the purpose of us reaching out to you today is to kind of show you that, yes, we do serve that group, and we like to serve a larger chunk of them by assisting individuals who are privately sponsored to come in and access services at the Newcomer Centre of Peel, along with their sponsorship agreement holders. And so we know that there are many different aspects to the settlement process, and we actually have many different partnerships. We are associated with United Way, as well as we receive donations from schools and corporate donors who specifically want to help refugees. So we try and disseminate those goods that we receive out to our refugee community. And we really realize that it does take a village to raise a newcomer family. There's so many different moving parts to the settlement process. And we don't want sponsorship agreement holders to be on their own, really, when you can access resources that are already funded by the government, either through the province or through the federal ministry, to help with this process. So we hope that we can all work together, and I've just sort of posted our information there if you wanted to get more information about our specific services.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. That was also very interesting. We now have actually about 20 minutes exactly for some discussion and questions and answers. So as I had mentioned earlier, please, for those of you still listening and attending, please feel free to type your questions or your comments and use the hand icon, actually, so we can unmute you so that you can ask your questions directly. And we're also interested in hearing from you what some of your, if you want to share, of course, only what some of your interactions have been with settlement agencies in terms of eligibility, if there were any difficulties you encountered, and if so, with what specific settlement services did you as sponsors have a difficult time engaging with or accessing. So these are some of the questions we're interested in, and I can see that Uzma has their hand up. So I'm just going to, Uzma, you're unmuted.
Thank you. So my question is with Sylvia.
Sure.
When you do information orientation and in-depth need assessment, settlement action plan, what is then to follow up?
Right, very good question. Sorry, can you hear me? I'm unmuted, right? Okay, sorry, just checking. Yeah, so actually we do have our own templates that we've sort of devised with the help of our funders in terms of the needs assessment. We have a series of questions that we'll go through with clients just to kind of make sure that we hit some of the major issues, but then also we allow for discussion just to take place so that it's just naturally, and it's an organic process in terms of getting some background information from clients and making sure that we understand where they've come from, how long they've been here, what are some of the things that they've already done, and what remains to be done. And we do have a settlement action plan template as well that we do follow in terms of documenting it. So it's uniform across all of the settlement counselors that are using this template. But in terms of follow-up, and so that is something that we actually have an internal database that we do use within our organization, and I know that there are some other organizations out there who are using the OCASI Client Management System database, so it's called OCMS for short. And within that, we are entering in the settlement action plan, but we can get prompts from the system to remind us to follow up with certain clients. We set due dates. We send out automated email reminders to clients to kind of complete certain tasks that they have already been spoken to about and whatnot. And really it's just about calling and double checking to see where the client's at within their settlement action plan. But a lot of the time, because we do have such a large client load, we do rely on the clients themselves to come back to us as well should their needs change or should they have additional questions, so that we can then document that as a new settlement action plan or just additional items that are added to their current plan. So, and we are consistently calling other service providers when we make a referral, for example, to another organization or whatnot. We might call also just to see if the client had gone to that next point of referral, etc. So we have a couple of techniques, but really it is about just maintaining that ongoing conversation with clients.
Right. Thank you very much. It was wonderful presentation from both of you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Uzma. The next question we have is from Brian for Sylvia. Brian is saying he noticed that only 6% of your clientele are privately sponsored refugees. Sorry. And as a sub, how might we do to encourage more of our newcomers to use your services or other organizations' services?
Yeah, that is a very good question, actually. And I think that's why we're doing webinars such as this, to kind of reach out to the sponsorship agreement holders so that there's more awareness about the fact that there are settlement services that are willing to work with privately sponsored refugees. And the reason that our GAR client number is so high was because we were one of the organizations that was associated with working with the Resettlement Assistance Program, so the RAP programs. And we were going into the hotels and serving government-assisted refugees right upon their arrival. And that's because just we've been connected with COSTI, which is a RAP program in the Toronto area, as well as the Polycultural Immigrant Community Services, which is another RAP program that exists in Mississauga that was newly funded. So that is why we were better connected with those. We had partnerships with those organizations, and we were connected better to that group of clients. However, we know now that there's a lot more interest in bringing in more privately sponsored refugees, as opposed to the focus that used to be on government-assisted refugees. And we are just simply trying to get the word out there, because the NSP2 program is relatively new. We've had it for about a year now. But in essence, there are many sponsorship agreement holders that didn't know that such programs exist. And we're just trying to get the word out there into the community so that people can connect with us. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, Brian, if you have any follow-up question to that, you can feel free to mention that as well. And Sylvia, actually, I have a question about that as well, because you mentioned the GAR number was so high because of your partnership work with the RAP reception centers in the region. Do you anticipate that it will remain as high? Because I know with the next arrivals, some things, so there are some configurations that are different in terms of who's at the airport, in terms of which organization. Are you anticipating the same high levels of GAR clients?
Right. I think that the government, in terms of at the federal level, has sort of shifted their focus away from bringing in such a large influx of GARs all at once, and so the focus is kind of bringing in more privately sponsored refugees. And I know that's sort of on the Ontario agenda as well, and that we're expecting a higher influx of actually privately sponsored refugees moving forward. But I guess, yeah, we'll have to see. The trends are constantly changing, so we're definitely keeping an eye out so that we can make sure our programming is sort of customized to the types of clients that we're seeing more often. But there is much overlap between the needs of GARs versus privately sponsored refugees. The difference really is how they've come into Canada, under which circumstances, and of course the sponsorship agreement holders are providing a lot of support to privately sponsored refugees. But again, some of the same needs might manifest themselves in different groups of refugees. And so we're very well equipped and ready to serve more privately sponsored, hopefully.
Thank you, Sylvia. We have a similar question for LIsa by Brian, which is, what is the percentage of privately sponsored newcomers at Wesley?
Okay. So at Wesley, since we are a resettlement assistance program, we work a lot with our GARs, the government assisted refugees, since we have our reception center there. I don't have a percentage, but I have a number of GARs that we've served at Wesley. So since December 20th, 2015, we have served 1,654 at our location. And in regards to the privately sponsored refugees, so my role, I do a lot of work with the private sponsors. So I do offer orientation sessions, information sessions in regards to various topics, Ontario Works, mental health. And through that, the sponsors themselves are able to learn about the services that are available to them, or other topics that they might come across during their sponsorship, and they, in a way, relay the message to their privately sponsored families that they have. And then I also do offer some information sessions about how to privately sponsored for the privately sponsored refugees. So they're more than welcome to come and attend those, and we have Arabic speaking interpreters available for them.
Great, thank you. And we have a comment from Ilana, and please, anyone else who has questions or comments, feel free to type them or use the hand icon. I'm going to read to you Ilana's comment. She is part of a sponsorship group. They sponsored newcomers from the Democratic Republic of Congo who came under the Blended Visa Office Referred Program. She says we have relied on our partner SA, sponsorship agreement holder, to help us figure out what needs to be done. We have not yet referred our newcomers to a settlement agency. They've been here for 3 months because we have found that a lot of the services offered at a settlement agency have been already done by us, the sponsors. We hope to use the settlement agency to help the new family with employment and possible education paths. Thank you, Ilana, for sharing your experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If LIsa or Sylvia, if you want to comment on that, feel free.
Actually, yeah, I was going to say that's really great that as a sponsorship agreement holder, that there are many of the settlement needs that are being addressed by those groups towards the privately sponsored refugees. So that is really great. I think the purpose of settlement agencies is to not replace the work that's being done by the sponsorship agreement holders, but to help complement it in a way. There might be resources that we might have access to that could help in terms of with the employment search or continuing education or whatnot. So really it's just about filling any gaps and just providing additional support as opposed to replacing what sponsorship agreement holders are already doing and what they're bound to do as SAWs.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah.
I do have a GAR report if anyone's interested at Wesley, if they would like to access.
Sure.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Do you want to?
Oh yeah. So Wesley, we do have our Hamilton Government Assisted Refugee Resettlement Progress Report that was released in March 2017. So it goes in. There's quite a bit of graphs and actual numbers. If you'd like to see what our organization has done through the RAP program at Wesley. So I can have that link available somewhere.
Yeah,
that if you're looking for more information, you could definitely access.
Yeah, there will be a follow-up email that will go out, and we can include that for sure.
Perfect.
That's great. That's really great.
We have another comment/question from Barbara. She's saying certainly settlement agencies are finally more aware that privately sponsored refugees are eligible for ISAP or NSP services, which was sometimes a problem in the past when sponsors brought newly arrived privately sponsored refugees into agencies. So there's more awareness now. The newer aspect is settlement agencies who will assist the sponsoring groups with the application process. Sponsorship agreement holders are not funded to provide the support. So with this support, she's referring to assisting sponsorship groups with the actual application process, the forms and the process itself.
Okay. Okay.
And the question is, who funds Wesley to do this work? Is it part of NSP?
The new... Yeah.
The Newcomer Centre.
Yeah, so my role exactly, I'm very involved with that whole process. I advise them what forms to fill out. I also assist in filling out the forms, and my funding is through MCI.
So
through NSP, yes. Yeah.
Ontario Ministry. Barbara, if you have any follow-up question, please go ahead. Anybody else have a question? Feel free to type it or use the hand icon. I think we can take 2 more. We also had a question for you, the audience. Attendees. Is there as those of you who are sponsors, is there any, or were there any specific settlement services that you had a difficult time accessing for the sponsored refugees? Because we have heard over the past year from some sponsors through focus groups and roundtable discussions that there was still confusion, a little bit of confusion around eligibility and what types of services privately sponsored refugees are eligible for. And I think Lisa and Sylvia have both highlighted that as permanent residents, they're really eligible for any government funded programs other than RAP, which is really exclusively for GARs. But if anyone would like to share their experience, we'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, because it really is great that privately sponsored refugees really do qualify for NSP programming, which is under MCI, as well as IRCC funding under the federal umbrella of funding. So there's actually quite a few services that they can be accessing. And yeah, with regards to the comment about there being more awareness from settlement agencies about the fact that private sponsored refugees can access all of those programs.
Seems that there are no more questions coming in. I would just like to let you know that we do have. Actually, there's one more question. Sorry. And the comment and the question following is, in Toronto, it's from Barbara. In Toronto, it is truly hard to find the right agency because there are so many, and each agency wants to keep the client even if they don't offer what the family is really looking for. So seniors or youth groups in the newcomer language, etc. How can these be found? And with these, I'm assuming Barbara is referring to, the right agency or the program that's really catering to the needs of that particular person or family.
I think Lisa actually presented some great resources in terms of Settlement.Org. That's actually housed by OCASI, where you can identify different settlement agency service providers near where you're located. But yes, I mean, there is still, every agency has perhaps some variances in funding and offer different types of programming, whether it's youth focused or Swiss or this or that. So it really is just about reading up on the agency a little bit and getting some information about that. In the region of Peel, we also have a website called immigrationpeel.ca, which is an immigration portal that can help you find service providers in the region of Peel specifically. But sometimes it's about trial and error or calling a trusted agency and trying to find out a little bit more information. By our mandate, we don't have a catchment area, so we can serve clients from any area of Ontario, Canada, etc. However, we really do try and refer clients to an agency that's closest to their home, just because case management, it's an ongoing process, and a lot of the time we work with clients for years sometimes, just depending on the circumstances. So it's really not of benefit to the client to have to travel really far to access those services if they have something nearby. But yeah, you have to find a good fit for you too, because the settlement process is very, very personal, and you have to connect well with your settlement counselor or the service provider staff that's there.
And Sylvia or Lisa, maybe one of you, do you have any recommendations for sponsors who feel they are in that situation where perhaps there might be programs or individual services that are better suited, but the settlement worker, in the eyes of their sponsor, is reluctant to refer the client out? Is there something that the client can do or that the sponsors can do to support the sponsored refugee?
Sorry, can you say that again?
In that sort of situation where the sponsors feel the agency is holding on to a client and are not open to referring them out? What can there be done, or what can sponsors do as advice?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think like we really rely on the sponsorship agreement holders because they're familiar with systems, so they know that you're not bound to one particular settlement counselor, so you can always move. So hopefully the SAW are sort of advocating on behalf of the client, right, Lisa? Like hopefully at that point you can encourage a transfer.
Yeah, you're not entirely bound to one particular agency, and hopefully no one would make you feel that way if there's a service that you know that you could really benefit from. I think sponsors, SAWs, the sponsors should do more research in their community and find out what exactly there is to offer. And there's so many services available, and it's really hard to know what organizations offer what unless you call or just go on their website. So I know at Wesley we do have a Syrian youth program for Syrians at risk, and they each receive their own ICM, so they're intensive case managers through that program. So we do offer assistance for youth, for newcomers.
Thank you. And just maybe a point of clarification is also that sponsored refugees or any newcomer can certainly access services at multiple agencies at the same time, right? Because they have different programs at different times. And we have one.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead, Celia.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say that it really is client-centered. So any client can actually go and shop around for settlement services that best fit their needs.
Yeah. And we have one more question.
Okay.
This one is from Brian. It's one of the issues we face with privately sponsored refugees is the misunderstanding that they are entitled to government money similar to government-assisted refugees. Have service providers experienced similar misunderstandings?
Okay. That's an interesting question. So GARs are entitled to receiving money through the federal government as part of the RAP program. However, the private sponsorship program is quite different. That entails having a financial plan, and usually the sponsors themselves have a budget, a budget available that they discuss with their families. So the families should be aware of, of certain expenses that they do have and where that money is coming from.
Have you experienced
no
confusion around that?
No, I work a lot with the group of 5 and the community sponsors. So community sponsors are churches, and they're very well organized. They have really great budget sheets that they've outlined for certain areas for clothing, food, and that's something that they discuss with the family. That way, they need to have some sort of awareness of what they're working with and understanding a bit of where the funds are coming from. And then also you also want to prepare them for month 13, right after that sponsorship period has ended. You want to ensure that they're well equipped.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Lisa hit it on the nose that essentially there is a lot of like financial literacy programming that's being introduced through NSP to kind of help with month 13. Ontario Works understanding that, and just understanding that the income does drop a bit significantly from month 12 to month 13. And so just understanding how to work with the budget and the finances that they do have available. But it's just about being transparent and trying as best as possible to explain it to clients what the difference is between a GAR versus a private sponsor and what the different undertakings are.
Great. Thank you. We're actually a little bit over time, but I really want to thank everyone for attending, and especially Lisa and Sylvia for taking the time. Lisa came all the way from Hamilton today to our office. So thank you both for making the time. I know it's a busy time for everyone, including those online, the end of the year-end reports. So thank you, and thank you for your attention. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording from today's webinar, and there will be also a link to the presentations. And we would really appreciate it also if you can complete the evaluation survey. It will be when you exit this webinar, there will be a pop-up window, and it's not spam. No worries, it's not anything that will affect your computer. It just has a link for the evaluation survey. If you can take a couple of minutes to answer the questions, they're really just 4 questions, to give us some feedback. It really helps us to plan future webinars and gives the speakers also some feedback. You also have an option of completing that survey in 2 days when you receive a follow-up email. If you prefer, you can also just email me. The email address is refugeesettlement@ocasi.org with your feedback. You'd be happy to receive any sort of feedback from you. So thank you again for your time. On behalf of OCASI and LISA and Sylvie, we want to thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you.